You're 60 years old, married, and you've built up in your combined 401ks $1.5 million, and you're thinking to yourself, we're looking to plan to retire in 5 years, but how do we actually put that plan together? How do we build a plan for that retirement even though we're half a decade away? That's what we're going to look at in our video today. Hello, my name is John Vandergriff. I'm one of the owners and the wealth planning team lead at Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, where we help people with this exact situation. Sometimes people think either they don't need to plan anything until they get on the doorstep of retirement. Some people think, well, I've got to start when I'm 30. You know, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Usually about 10 years or so away or earlier is a good time to start making some decisions and really starting to have some conversations like the one we're going to have today. So what we're looking at is a situation with a 60-year-old couple, $1.5 million in their 401ks. They've wanted to create a plan, and again, 5 years out is a good time to start putting some things in place and really start affecting some of the ways that they're making decisions. And so as we get started with this, I always like to think about the way that we build a plan is very similar to the way that you would build a house, where as you look at it, the most important piece of this house, as you build a house, is going to be that foundation piece. And really for the foundation of a retirement plan is going to be let's make that a little bit bigger for you here. The goals and objectives that you have that are unique to your situation. Because again, there are no cookie cutter ways to do this. There are no strategies that work for every situation. You need to make sure that you identify the things that you're wanting to do. What do you want retirement to look like? How do you need to make decisions on the way to get there is what we're going to look at as we build. But we've got to make sure that we paint a picture of the things that we're trying to accomplish. And then we start going into what we call a discussion of how do we build a plan for everything. And again, that's going to cover 5 areas that we're going to hit, but how do we make sure that we solve for, first, the income that we need, and then the effect that that's going to have is usually going to be directly in line with our investment strategy, making sure that if there is any money that we don't generate from outside sources like Social Security or pensions, we're planning our investments to cover that income first, and then all the other things that we need from our investments like accessibility, risk, inflation protection, all those. Taxes are a thread that weaves through all 5 of these areas, as you'll see when we go through that discussion. Healthcare decisions, how do we make decisions with, the type of plans we need with Medicare, but also how we're going to cover things like long-term care in the future. And then how do we make sure that we don't forget a family or legacy strategy so that we can take care of, obviously, when you pass away, but also the things that change if you're a married unit and you go from a married couple to a single individual. What are the things in this that change? Because most likely your taxes are going to increase, your income may change, you may decide to change your investment strategy. There's a lot of things that get impacted when you go through that discussion. So as we look at that and kind of bringing this into this example, I've preloaded a few things here, but the main objectives that we have, obviously, as we started our video, this couple wants to retire at 65. They're interested in Roth conversions, but also does it make sense to do Roth contributions in their plan, changing their investments to reflect the coming retirement. And then they ask the question that we get a lot, what am I missing? What am I not thinking about in building a strategy for what my retirement future will be? So as we look at this particular couple, in today's money, they need to generate about $10,000 a month today, and that's net of taxes. So based on projecting forward with inflation for 5 years, also grossing it up for taxes, we put it in a position where we figured this couple would need $150,000 of gross money, and this is in Tennessee where we only have federal taxes. And so starting at $150,000, and really, if you want to have a little bit more of a buffer, let's make it about $155,000 here. The income sources that they have at full retirement age, this is their Social Security amount, so $6,200 combined. Based on the way that we would build this particular plan, the recommendation would look at full retirement age so that we could weave in some tax planning into those early years of retirement. And so whenever they got to full retirement age, they would have $74,000 a year coming outside of their plan. So they would need to generate the $155,000 from their investments the first 2 years, and then on an ongoing basis, a little over $80,000, obviously adjusting for inflation. So as we look at this, looking at investment savings today, combined 401k totals at $1.5 million. So again, to determine where we're at from an income need, we also need to project a little bit about their investment savings. So I did some of this work on an Excel spreadsheet before I did this, so I'm not Rain Man. But if we averaged a 4% growth in whatever their mix was over the next 5 years, and they are maxing out their contributions, and with employer match, they're putting in $70,000 a year. And so again, being conservative and not adding inflation to that match, if they made 4% a year over that, that $1.5 million would turn into $2.2 million. And so roughly their $80,000 of need up here off of that 2.2 is going to be right around 3.6% a year. Now, as we said, the first 2 years are going to be a much higher withdrawal rate, but longer term, really in that 3.6, it may bump up to 4% if they didn't have much growth those first 2 years of retirement. That's okay. We like to see this number be at 4% or less when we build plans, just so that you're in a position where you're not asking too much from your savings at the beginning of retirement. And so as we look at this, from a decision-making process, solving for income with your investments is first priority. You want to make sure that you walk through this first, because that is where I think a lot of people can have mistakes if they're not paying attention to the risk profile of this and making sure that they're pulling this from good, safe places. You could be pulling out during a downturn, causing more losses and making the recovery on those dollars harder. So, as we look at this, whenever we start to have an investment conversation, there's really kind of an order of importance that we like to look at. First is making sure that we're solving for investments that are going to help us generate the long-term income that we need. So how do we make sure that we find good, safe places to invest a chunk of this money at first? And then whatever's left over, then we start to have the conversation of how risky do we want to be. And so again, that's going to be a lot of questions of how much do we need for liquidity? How much is the maximum loss that we would like to see on our total bucket? There's a lot of ways that we're going to ask that question just to make sure that we're in a position to really try to hone in on, again, once we get our income needs covered, how risky do we want to be above that? Because really what you're trying to determine here is how much money do they need that has a little bit less risk but more accessibility to it. And then whatever's left over after you solve for your income and your access needs is what you can use for long-term growth potential to help you cover inflation. And then the third thing that we look at from an investment perspective that's going to transition well into our next point is how do we make sure that we align the different tax buckets that we have with the different investments that could thrive in certain buckets. So as we look at this particular couple currently has $175,000 of income. And so they're in a position right now where as we look at it, their top dollar is in 22% tax bracket, but they don't have a lot of diversification from their retirement savings because they've got $100,000 in the bank and after-tax money, but the bulk of their savings is really in these pre-tax buckets. And so, as we look at this, through paying attention to current tax code, but then also what long-term taxes may look like, we want to make sure that we're trying to drive some good decisions, both with conversions, but also contributions. So as we look at this couple, as we looked at, their taxable income was $175,000, but they together are putting in a little over $60,000 a year into their retirement plans and deducting that. So that $175,000 is after those deductions come off. And as we look at it, their top tax dollar today would be just over the top of the 22% into the 24%, but a bulk of those contributions are avoiding paying tax at 22%. So the first thing that we want to look at for this couple is, does it make sense for them to pay those taxes at 22%? Well, if we look at, what's set to change, January 1st of 2026, if nothing else happens, our current tax code is set to revert back to the way 2017 brackets were. And if they had standard deductions with this couple, in fact does, that 22% would turn into 25% on those dollars if they were taking those out. and contributing. So as we look at it on the short term, if they could pay 22 instead of 25, that becomes a good deal. Especially if we look longer term, their need amount in retirement is going to be $150,000. They're obviously going to be taking out from the 10 and 15 as we look at that versus the 12 and 22. And so the thing that I don't want you to get lost on, some people say, well, some of their dollars are going to get taken out at 15 instead of 22, so they should not do any Roth conversions at all. I look at it as a both conversation where they need to do some conversions or contributions to Roth now, and they need to benefit from maximizing these brackets as they get into the future, because the concern that I have is what happens if this incremental increase doesn't solve the problems that we have with our debt, and then we have to get into much higher situations like we saw in 1981 and earlier where taxes are much higher. And so as we look at this, their projected income of $150,000, or in today's money, probably 135, would really be taxed noticeably higher than where it would be today. So as we look at this, just by making their contributions, going back to our example here, if they switch those contributions, didn't do major conversions, they would probably be able to get a majority, if not all of those, done at a 22% tax bracket, which I think, looking at the numbers the way we do, I think would be a good decision for them. Then it would just be a conversation of, does it make sense to start to convert what's already in pre-tax dollars into that 24% bracket or higher, depending on where you're at. And obviously we're looking at just federal tax rates. If you're in a state that has state income tax or even city taxes that go on your income, you've got to add those things to it as well. So again, this person I think would benefit from contributions for sure, conversions potentially, depending on where we see their income adjusting to long term, and really just how to maximize some of those savings dollars that they have. So this couple does not have long-term care insurance. I don't know that that's necessarily a recommendation right now, because they do have a good pool of assets that are not income dependent that they could position for accessibility for health care. One of the things, though, that we like to see is if we start this conversion conversation and whittling these pre-tax buckets down to tax-free buckets like Roth IRAs, that will increase the amount of liquid after-tax savings, and I think that needs to be a point of focus for this couple, because again, that's going to be less than 10% of their overall savings is liquid and after-tax today. We want to see that increase just so that if they do have a major healthcare event in the future, they're in a position where they can access this money and not think about adding $50,000, $100,000 on top of their income taxes in a year where you really wouldn't want to. So, and then as we look at this is actually a couple that does not have any children, so each other is the primary focus, obviously 100% beneficiaries. After that, they do have some relatives that they would want this to go to, but then half of this money would actually go toward charitable causes. So as we look at this, they do have each other listed up to date. They don't have all their estate documents, so making sure that they get wills, powers of attorney executed, potentially trust, depending on how they're wanting to do this. But one of the focuses for this particular couple, since they are wanting long-term charitable dollars instead of waiting until they die, using some of that on an annual basis to try to maximize some of their tax conversions could help them be in a position where they actually get a benefit from these dollars. It also takes some of the pressure off of converting everything because once they get to RMD age, they could have QCDs that they use, qualified charitable distributions that would allow them to not pay income taxes on some of the pre-tax dollars here. So again, we've got to make sure that we're having a well-rounded discussion here, because if we only focus on one of these, we could be making detrimental decisions to the others. And I think in all the situations that I look at, if you have somebody who's only picking investments for you, rarely are they talking about taxes. Sometimes they're talking about an income plan and how to execute that from a good, safe place. But you really need to make sure all these pieces are fitting together so that if we go back to our beginning example here, you have the benefit of a good roof here. You said, well, what does the roof mean in our house example here? If you build a good plan, the fruit of the plan is what protects it. It's not that the plan's going to shield you from everything, because the truth is all the strategies that we make here may need to change if our goals and objectives change, but that's what should drive how we build the house. What protects the plan and keeps you from making, I think, mistakes is having more of what we call internally the 3 C's. And so what are those 3 C's? Well, the first of those is very important, and that is control. Now you may say, well, John, I'm managing all my money myself. How can I have more control than I have right now? Well, the truth is, if you're managing all your money yourself, you probably know what your investments are doing, or hopefully you do, but you may not have the kind of control that you want in the way that this practically impacts your life. How do we pull income from the right place? How do we take the right amount of risk overall and get a little bit more conservative, which is where more self-managers struggle? How do we pay appropriate amount of taxes? Where do we go for healthcare? How do we make sure that we have our legacy strategies taken care of? We want you to have control over all the things that you're going to face in retirement, not just one piece of it. And we're going to help you do that because, again, our job is not to take your control away from your investments. It's really to work with you, take some things off your plate that you may not be good at, or take some things off your plate totally at some point because, again, the older you get, you may not be making the best investment decision. So we want to provide assistance there and really allow you to have the control you need. And if we do that well, it's going to lead to the next C, which is more confidence. We want you to have more confidence as you progress through retirement, and that's what a good plan should give you, so that you know that you've planned for all the things that you can. Now, like we said, we don't know how your life's going to turn out. We can't predict the future, but instead of just saying, well, I don't know what's going to happen and who cares about planning? No, you want to plan for everything that you can and then know that you've got a response if something happens and you pivot instead of breaking this whole thing down and starting from the bottom. Because usually, if you're in the middle of a storm, that's the wrong time to start building a house because, again, your foundation is going to be wrecked and everything else is going to look really muddy. So, again, we want you to have control. We want you to have confidence. And then the last one, as a boy from Tennessee, is a good one. We want comfort. The reason you retire is because you worked hard and you want to be able to enjoy the fruit of many years of labor. If you have the right kind of control that gives you more confidence, it should help you be more comfortable in the retirement decision that you're making. And as we tie this back into this couple, they're 5 years away, but they want more of these three things. They want to know that they're on the right path, they're making the right decisions, so that in all of these areas, these things are working together so that when they push the button at 65 to retire, they know exactly what to expect in the way they're making decisions now. And if you don't have that, it's very easy to get that. All you got to do is call somebody like us or call us directly. You're going to see below this video, there's a link that you can schedule a time to meet with us. I would encourage you to do that. What you watched us walk through is a very high-level example of what our first meeting will look like. So that way you're knowing already what to expect from us. At this point, we normally take people through what we call a test and recommendations period, where we're going to look at what you're doing now, see how closely this reflects what you're looking to do here, and if there are some decisions that need to be made differently, that's where we're going to come in and say, if you work with us, this is what we would recommend. We would talk about cost structures and things at that time. But really just trying to help you make some good decisions when it comes to building a plan, not just an investment strategy, a well-rounded plan where all of these things matter, because at the end of the day, we work with a lot of people in retirement. The ones that feel the best are the ones that have a lot of connection and buy-in to the things that aren't just about your investment. So as we look at this, we want to make sure as we walk with you through this, we're able to help you make the decisions that you need to make big picture so that you can really do the things that you're looking to do for the next 20, 25, 30 years of retirement. So as we look at this, again, we would encourage you to give us a call, see how we can help you. If you have questions about our example here, feel free to leave comments and we'll respond back to those. But more than anything, we hope you enjoyed this time and we look forward to continuing this discussion with you sometime in the future.